there exists a quiet fantasy that lingers in the back of almost every exhausted mind across this continent. The scenario usually unfolds the same way. One morning, you wake up and glance at your bank statement. Then you check your rent. After that, you look at the price of a single avocado at Woolworths, and suddenly a thought takes hold. Enough is enough. At that moment, you decide that you are going to vanish. Not in a dramatic, witness protection-style disappearance, but in a calm, intentional, and almost invisible way, where nobody really needs to know where you went. The beautiful, terrifying, and strangely magnificent truth about Australia is that such an idea is not entirely unrealistic. In fact, there are locations across the country where living on $900 a month is not merely about scraping by. It can actually allow you to live. Truly live. There are 5 such places worth discussing. So subscribe, and let's begin. Number 5. Pedy, Queensland. We start in a place that most Australians would struggle to locate on a map. Even if you handed them the map along with a compass, a GPS device, and a personal guide named Kevin who has lived there for 4 decades. Pedy lies in the Western Downs region of Queensland, roughly 320 kilometers west of Brisbane. In Queensland terms, that distance is practically next door, although in reality it involves about 4 hours of driving through landscapes so flat that you might begin to wonder whether turning the steering wheel is even necessary. The town has a population of around 1,200 people, depending on whom you ask, and whether they count those who technically moved away but still receive their mail there. Pedy is primarily a farming community centered on wheat, cotton, cattle, and grain sorghum. It is the kind of place where drivers wave at each other on the road, not because they recognize one another, but because the appearance of another human being is rare enough to deserve acknowledgement. The reason Pedy earns a place on this list is simple: housing costs. The median house price in Pedy sits at approximately $200,000. That figure buys you a real house with walls, a roof, and, presumably, a door. By comparison, $200,000 in Sydney might purchase roughly 1/4 of a bathroom in a suburb so distant from the city center that your mailing address might technically belong to another region. In Melbourne, that same amount might secure a parking space in a building where apartments begin around $800,000. In Pedy, however, $200,000 can buy you a house sitting on an actual block of land. But buying property is not our focus here. We are discussing survival on $900 a month. In Pedy, rental properties commonly appear on the market for between $150 and $250 per week. If we take a midpoint of $200 weekly, that equals $800 per month in rent. This leaves $100 for everything else. That figure sounds tight, and it certainly is, yet the magic of small-town life begins to appear here. Groceries in Pedy are not necessarily as inexpensive as one might expect. There is a general store and some supply options, but the selection is limited and prices reflect the cost of transporting goods deep into regional Queensland. However, many residents offset those expenses by growing vegetables, keeping chickens, and participating in a form of informal bartering that still survives in communities where everyone knows everyone else. Your neighbor might have too many tomatoes, while you might have extra eggs. No paperwork is filed with the Australian Taxation Office. People simply trade and eat. Much of the real savings come from things you do not spend money on. There is no public transport in Pedy, which means there are no public transport fares. While you will need a car, fuel expenses stay manageable because most trips involve short drives to the supermarket or nearby areas. There is also no nightlife. As a result, there are no nightlife costs. Trendy cafes selling $7.50 flat whites have not penetrated this deeply into the Western Downs. There is, however, a pub, and the pub serves beer at normal pub prices. If you want coffee, you make it yourself at home like a regular human being. Entertainment here revolves around activities that cost nothing. People go walking, tend their gardens, or chat with neighbors about the weather. In Pedy, discussing the weather is not small talk. It is practically an endless topic because the local climate is unpredictable and occasionally alarming. The community hall hosts events, and the annual show is a significant occasion. Sporting clubs provide additional social outlets. In short, social life exists, but it does not demand $80 every Friday night just to feel included. Employment, of course, is the central question. Making money in Tara without being a farmer can be challenging. Job opportunities within the town itself are limited. Some residents work in agriculture, while others commute to nearby towns such as Dalby or Chinchilla, each roughly an hour away and possessing slightly larger economies. Remote work is becoming more common as well, assuming the internet connection cooperates, which it does not always do, although improvements continue. The national broadband network has reached Tara, which can either be seen as a triumph of modern infrastructure or a cosmic accident, depending on your perspective. Healthcare infrastructure is basic but functional. Tara has a medical center, meaning you do not have to drive to Dalby every time you develop a cough. The nearest hospital is in Dalby, about an hour away, which is manageable for routine care though less ideal for emergencies. In genuine emergencies, the Royal Flying Doctor Service provides assistance. Their ability to land aircraft on remote paddocks and save lives is one of those uniquely Australian phenomena that inspires both pride and a certain awareness of just how remote these places truly are. Housing quality in Tara varies. Some rentals are attractive Queenslander-style homes with verandas, raised floors that encourage airflow, and ample space that prevents any sense of claustrophobia. Others are, diplomatically speaking, projects. These are homes where the landlord's idea of maintenance may differ dramatically from your own. Yet when rent costs only $200 a week for a 3-bedroom house, you quickly learn to overlook small imperfections, like a screen door that refuses to close completely or bathroom tiles installed by someone who believed right angles were merely optional suggestions. Crime in Tara is practically non-existent by city standards. The town does have a police station, but it is hardly overwhelmed. The greatest criminal disturbance might involve loose livestock wandering where they should not be. While technically someone's responsibility, it is hardly the sort of issue that keeps residents awake at night, unless the livestock belong to them. Ultimately, Tara works for people trying to survive on $900 per month because expectations are modest while satisfaction remains surprisingly high. No one here attempts to impress anyone else. Designer clothing rarely appears at the pub, and nobody uploads brunch photos to Instagram, mainly because brunch usually consists of toast with Vegemite eaten on a back veranda while watching the sunrise over nearby paddocks. For the right person, that lifestyle is not deprivation. It is freedom. Number 4. Charleville, Queensland. Staying within Queensland, but traveling much farther west brings us deeper into the outback. A landscape where the horizon stretches endlessly and the sky appears so vast that you suddenly understand why the word vast exists at all. Charleville sits roughly 770 kilometers west of Brisbane in the Merway Shire. It is a town that rewards patience, resilience, and an appreciation for beauty in emptiness. With a population of around 3,500 residents, Charleville is practically a metropolis compared with Tara. Yet it remains small enough that the cashier at the supermarket likely knows your name, your favorite foods, and possibly even your relationship status. The town displays all the classic characteristics of an outback settlement. Wide streets, low buildings, enormous skies occupying most of your field of vision, and seasonal extremes that can test your decision-making skills. Summer temperatures may make you question every life choice that brought you there, while winter nights become cold enough to remind you how grateful you are for blankets. The median house price in Charleville is approximately $165,000. That amount buys a home in a town equipped with schools, supermarkets, sporting facilities, a library, and even a hospital. Remarkably, Charleville also has a cinema, a genuine movie theater with seats, a screen, and films released within the past decade, which is more than can be said for some rural towns. Rent typically averages around $250 per week, translating to roughly $1,000 per month, slightly above our $900 target. However, smaller apartments and modest one-bedroom homes can be found between $180 and $200 per week. At those prices, rent ranges from $780 to $860 per month, leaving between $40 and $120 for food, utilities, and occasional small pleasures. This is where Charleville offers certain advantages. Electricity costs in remote Queensland may qualify for government rebates. Water charges are usually lower than in major cities. Food prices, while not dramatically cheaper than urban supermarkets, can be managed through the same strategies common across regional Australia. Grow what you can, purchase items in bulk when discounted, and become comfortable with simple staples like rice, beans, and seasonal produce. A simpler diet replaces the elaborate city menu, but simplicity does not necessarily equal hardship. Another benefit Charleville has over smaller towns like Tara is employment. As a regional service hub for the surrounding pastoral areas, it offers more jobs than its population might suggest. Opportunities exist in healthcare, education, local government, agriculture, retail, and hospitality. The hospital employs staff. Schools require teachers. The local council needs workers. And the pubs always appreciate bartenders capable of pouring beer while listening to farmers who have spent months on isolated stations speaking mainly to sheep. Tourism also contributes to the local economy. Charleville hosts the Cosmos Center, an astronomical observatory that capitalizes on the region's crystal-clear skies. Stargazing here is genuinely world-class. Observing the Milky Way from Charleville is not merely scenic. It can feel like a sensory assault reminding you how tiny you are in a universe of unimaginable scale. Whether that realization feels comforting or terrifying often depends on how many drinks you consumed earlier at the Royal Hotel. The town also features the Bilby Experience, a conservation and breeding program dedicated to protecting the greater bilby, a rabbit-sized marsupial with oversized ears that seems as though it were designed by a group of children who could not agree on what animal they wanted. This attraction draws visitors and provides additional income for the town. Living in Charleville on $900 per month demands discipline and occasional sacrifices. Some months will inevitably feel tighter than others. You will decline certain luxuries that city residents consider essential but are, upon closer inspection, optional. Streaming subscriptions become unnecessary when the library offers books. Gym memberships lose relevance when the Outback itself becomes your free exercise facility. Dining out becomes rare, but eating well remains possible. In exchange, Charleville offers something cities often lack: space. Physical space, certainly, since the nearest major settlement may lie hundreds of kilometers away, but also mental space. The silence here is not merely the absence of noise. It is the presence of something deeper. Mornings begin with birds rather than traffic, and your thoughts unfold uninterrupted by notifications or the background anxiety of constant competition. Healthcare in Charleville is surprisingly solid for a remote town. Charleville Hospital provides emergency care, general medical treatment, and basic surgical services. A dentist operates locally, and specialists occasionally visit. The Royal Flying Doctor Service maintains a nearby base as well. Living here does not mean risking your life due to lack of treatment options, a genuine concern in some remote communities. Education is also adequate. Charleville State High School serves secondary students across the region, while the local primary school has operated for over a century. While regional schooling differs from education in Brisbane, teachers who choose to work in places like Charleville often do so out of dedication rather than convenience. Their commitment sometimes produces teaching quality that standardized test scores fail to measure. Social opportunities exceed expectations. Residents participate in cricket, rugby league, tennis, swimming, and various other sports. The town even has a golf course, though in Charleville this means sandy fairways, greens that resemble browns, and rough terrain that merges seamlessly with the surrounding outback. Yet people still play, and they enjoy it. That enjoyment is ultimately the point. Some newcomers cannot tolerate life here and leave quickly. Others arrive in Charleville and never depart, having discovered something they did not realize they were seeking. And if you still have not subscribed by this point, you are effectively choosing to remain uninformed about affordable Australian towns, an interesting strategy considering your landlord has likely increased the rent again. Subscription is free. Housing, unfortunately, is not. But perhaps we can at least get those costs as close to free as geography allows. Number 3. Peterborough, South Australia. Leaving Queensland behind, we travel south into South Australia, a state the rest of the country often forgets exists until someone mentions wine or serial killers. Suddenly, everyone remembers it again. In many ways, South Australia might be the continent's most underrated region. It contains Adelaide, a city that is genuinely pleasant and far cheaper than Sydney or Melbourne. It contains the Barossa Valley, which produces wine capable of making French winemakers quietly irritated. and it contains an outback landscape that somehow feels even more outback than the outback elsewhere. Peterborough lies approximately 260 kilometers north of Adelaide along the Barrier Highway. The surrounding countryside consists of rolling pastoral land that appears picturesque, until you remember that paintings rarely include flies. The town's population is about 1,700 residents, fluctuating with seasonal employment and economic conditions, as well as with people who periodically attempt to move to Adelaide before discovering that Adelaide housing is no longer as inexpensive as it once was. What makes Peterborough remarkable is its affordability. The median property price sits around $150,000. That amount buys a house in a town that includes a supermarket, hospital, schools, churches, sporting facilities, a swimming pool, a library, and a railway heritage that attracts train enthusiasts from across Australia. Rental prices average about $280 per week, though smaller apartments, shared housing rooms, and older properties requiring what real estate agents politely describe as a bit of love can be rented for $120 to $180 weekly. At $150 per week, monthly rent totals roughly $650, leaving about $250 for food, utilities, and other necessities. That $250 food budget is tight, but manageable for someone willing to cook regularly, plan meals carefully, and buy staples in bulk. Fresh seafood, however, will likely disappear from your diet unless you befriend someone who owns a fishing rod and possesses extraordinary patience. Peterborough also has an unusual demographic feature. Approximately half the town's population originates from overseas. About 50% of residents were born in another country. Migration programs, refugee resettlement initiatives, and the simple availability of affordable housing have all contributed to this remarkable diversity. In a regional South Australian town, you might find an Afghan butcher, a Burmese shopkeeper, and neighbors from the Congo. This environment normalizes cultural difference rather than merely tolerating it, giving Peterborough a social character that many small towns lack. Originally named Petersburg after its German settlers, the town was renamed Peterborough in 1917 during World War I, when anti-German sentiment swept across Australia and prompted many communities to alter German-sounding place names. Historically, the town served as a major railway junction where three different rail gauges met, a logistical complication that perfectly illustrates how each Australian state once built railways independently without coordinating with its neighbors. Today, the Steamtown Heritage Rail Centre preserves that unusual railway history. Living in Peterborough on $900 per month is not merely possible, it can be comfortable. You may not dine at restaurants frequently or purchase new clothing every month, but you will have shelter, food, and the essential elements of a respectable life. The town includes medical services, pharmacies, and a hospital, ensuring healthcare access. Schools educate children. Sporting clubs and community groups provide social engagement. The climate reflects typical inland South Australian conditions: hot summers, cool winters, minimal rainfall, and a dry heat that either invigorates or exhausts depending on personal tolerance. The landscape may appear plain at first glance, but over time its subtle beauty emerges. Seasonal changes in grass color, shifting twilight light, and night skies so clear that stars appear impossibly bright without urban light pollution. Peterborough will not suit everyone, but it will suit someone. For those who appreciate simplicity, value diverse communities, and find beauty in quiet landscapes, paying $150 weekly for housing and living on $900 per month may feel less like compromise and more like an extraordinary bargain. If you need a particular product that the local supermarket does not stock, you are going to order it online and wait patiently for Australia Post to deliver it sometime between next Tuesday and the heat death of the universe. Living in Coober, Pedy requires a certain level of patience, resilience, and the ability to adapt to circumstances that would send many city dwellers running back to their climate-controlled apartments within a week. Healthcare in Coober, Pedy is basic but functional. The town has a hospital that provides primary medical services, emergency care, and visiting specialists who arrive periodically to deal with conditions that require expertise beyond the scope of a small outback facility. For serious cases, patients are transferred to Adelaide, which sits roughly 846 kilometers to the south along the Stewart Highway. While this distance sounds intimidating, the presence of medical evacuation services and well-maintained transport routes means residents are not completely isolated from the broader healthcare system. Education is also available in Coober, Pedy. The local school serves both primary and secondary students, and, like many institutions in remote Australia, it relies on a mix of traditional classroom teaching and distance learning resources. Children growing up here experience an environment vastly different from suburban Australia. Their playground is not a shopping mall or a crowded sports complex, but the open expanse of the South Australian outback, where imagination fills the gaps that infrastructure might otherwise occupy. Social life in Coober, Pedy revolves around community gatherings, local businesses, and the shared experience of living somewhere so unusual that every resident has a story worth telling. Restaurants, small pubs, and cafes, many of them run by immigrant families, provide meeting points where Greek, Serbian, Italian, Aboriginal, and countless other cultural traditions blend together in a setting that feels both remote and unexpectedly cosmopolitan. It is the kind of place where someone might discuss mining claims over dinner, while another person shares stories about finding a small opal in a tailings pile that paid their rent for the next 6 months. The landscape surrounding Coober, Pedy remains one of its most striking features. During the day, the terrain looks alien, flat expanses of pale earth punctuated by mounds of excavated dirt from decades of mining activity. Thousands of mine shafts, the area, each marking a moment when someone believed that the next shovel of soil might reveal a gemstone capable of changing their life. At night, however, the transformation is extraordinary. With almost no light pollution for hundreds of kilometers in any direction, the sky becomes a canvas of stars so dense and bright that many visitors describe it as overwhelming. Living here for $900 a month is not merely an exercise in financial survival. It represents a lifestyle built around simplicity, creativity, and a willingness to embrace unconventional solutions. When your home is carved into the side of a hill and naturally maintains a temperature of roughly 23 to 25 degrees Celsius year-round, the daily concerns that dominate urban life, energy bills, air conditioning repairs, heating costs, fade into the background. Food remains straightforward and practical. Residents often cook at home, buying essentials from the local supermarket, bakery, and butcher. The cost of groceries is slightly higher than in major cities due to transportation distances, but careful planning ensures that a modest budget stretches surprisingly far. Meals tend to be uncomplicated: pasta, rice, vegetables, bread, and occasionally meat purchased in bulk when prices drop. Transport expenses depend largely on how frequently you travel outside the town. Many residents drive older vehicles that prioritize reliability over style. Trips to nearby locations are planned carefully because distances in the outback are not trivial. Fuel stops are spaced far apart, and every journey becomes part of the rhythm of living in a remote environment. For those who enjoy exploration, Coober, Pedy offers countless opportunities to wander through abandoned mining areas, inspect unusual rock formations, or simply walk across the quiet desert plains. Tourism also plays a role in the town's economy, as travelers from around the world arrive to see the famous underground homes, visit the opal shops, and experience the surreal beauty of the landscape. The underground churches are particularly remarkable. Structures such as the Serbian Orthodox Church have been carved directly into sandstone hillsides, creating interiors that feel both ancient and futuristic at the same time. The soft stone allows intricate designs to be sculpted into walls and ceilings, giving these spaces an atmosphere unlike any conventional building. Despite its unusual architecture and remote location, Coober, Pedy functions as a complete community. It has police services, a hospital, schools, retail shops, and accommodation options for visitors passing through the region. The town survives because the people who live here have adapted to the environment rather than attempting to fight it. And that, perhaps, is the deeper lesson behind this entire list. Places like Tara, Charleville, Peterborough, Mount Hope, and Coober, Pedy demonstrate that affordability in Australia is not entirely extinct. It has simply moved far away from the major coastal cities where most people choose to live. Each location offers a different version of the same trade-off. You exchange convenience, nightlife, and endless consumer choices for space, quiet, and dramatically lower living costs. Instead of spending thousands of dollars each month just to exist in a crowded urban apartment, you can build a life where financial pressure is minimal and the horizon stretches far beyond the limits of the city skyline. Of course, these places are not perfect. Isolation can be challenging. Employment opportunities are limited. Extreme weather and long travel distances require planning and resilience. Yet for certain individuals, people who value independence, simplicity, and the freedom to live without constant financial stress, these towns represent something remarkable. They prove that the dream of disappearing quietly, stepping away from the relentless pace of modern urban life, and starting fresh somewhere unexpected is not merely a fantasy. In parts of Australia, it is still entirely possible. All it takes is the willingness to trade crowded streets for empty horizons, expensive apartments for modest homes, and the noise of millions for the silence of the outback. And sometimes, that silence is exactly what people have been searching for all along.